Encompass Communications and Learning is a full-service training and communications agency dedicated to helping life science teams enhance their skills and knowledge. The thoughts expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and not necessarily views of Encompass.
Welcome to Encompass Insider. I'm Jenn, Lalli, Senior Director of Business Development and Marketing here at Encompass Communications and Learning. And if you're wondering how to enhance your impact with live and virtual presentations, you'll be really interested in today's discussion. My guest is Cheryl Poulsen. She's a creative strategist, executive producer, and presentation coach at TMW Enterprises, which is a company with nearly 25 years experience providing creative, strategic, and also production management services to Fortune 500 companies worldwide. So Cheryl, so great to connect with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Cheryl, we just talked about your role. I know you're a busy lady. You're currently the creative strategist, executive producer, and a presentation coach for TMW. So could you tell us a little bit more about your background and what you do?
Sure, I'd love to. So I have spent more than 20 years working with clients across various industries, including the pharmaceutical industry. I've stage managed, I've produced, and I've directed shows for a wide variety of organizations. We've had audiences ranging anywhere from 50 senior executives to over 15,000 associates. So I've done a lot. I've been around for a while, and I've seen a lot. And interestingly, in this time, I've seen these organizations try to accomplish incredible things and adapt in the light of the pandemic to more virtual meetings. And I am really proud to be a part of this transformation that we're seeing in the industry.
I have to say that's a pretty impressive background. And after 20 years working in the industry, I'm really interested to ask you first, when clients come to you asking for a presentation coach, what are they typically seeking help with?
Well, I think there's a various amounts of things depending on the client. It's either their own physical space and being in a physical space, whether virtual or live events, but I think it's also a content and it's messaging. So we often approach from both sides to kind of help our presenters get the most impact out of their audience.
Absolutely. Can I ask, given the shift to more virtual, has there been one thing you find that clients routinely have been asking for or best practices around?
I don't know even that they're asking for specific things as much as it is we're seeing sort of pitfalls that they get into, if you will. A lot of times the transformation from live to virtual, people aren't considering the audience in this new way. Meaning that an audience is sitting there with many more distractions. They're not held captive in one space, a live ballroom or meeting space. They're now in front of a screen with kids at home, dogs, cats, delivery men, husbands, TV, internet glitches. So they're really distracted. And oftentimes clients have too much that they're trying to get through during a virtual event. So less is more, which is something that we often see that people aren't quite accustomed to yet.
No, it's a great point. I have to say, it strikes me personally as well, a lot of what you're saying. Are there any other common pitfalls that you find and that you see?
I think definitely that we're trying to get too much out in a shortened period of time, but also I believe it's the I have to be perfect. There has to be a perfect presentation as opposed to being real. And I think we lose that fact because we become more disconnected when we're trying to be perfect as opposed to authentic.
Great point. You've worked with clients across various industries, as you've mentioned, and certainly the life sciences industry. Could you just share with us any common tips that you typically share with your clients when it comes to presentation coaching? And obviously know that could mean the style, the presentation style, the actual presentation itself. Can you tell us more?
I think one of the biggest things that we'll do, or myself, that I tend to start off with the executives I'm working with is, what does the audience need to know? With everything you go through in your presentation, first ask yourself that as far as your content. What do they need to know as opposed to what do you feel you need to share? That's a big one that is missed often because ultimately you want the audience to take something away from whatever your presentation is. As far as style, I think one of the biggest things too is just relax. It is a conversation basically between two people. You don't have the energy in the same way because you don't have a huge live audience. And in the virtual world, it's a lot more intimate in the sense that the audience is the other person on the side of that screen. Whether there's one or 50,000, it's still basically a two-way conversation.
Absolutely. Are there any tips you have offered your clients around just making sure they stay relaxed and they come into that presentation as their best self?
Well, I think one, breathe. Honestly, the biggest thing is breathe. Know your stuff. That's another one. Oftentimes we'll have people come in and they feel like, oh, I'm so anxious. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Well, if you know what you're talking about and you just take a breath and you really just consider it a conversation, it's not that big a deal.
Great point. It doesn't have to be so rehearsed. Be yourself, as you said, be authentic. No,
Yeah.
great point. I didn't know if you got to finish your tips. Were there any more that you wanted to share with the audience?
Less is more, relax, and then be authentic. I think that's the biggest thing. Oftentimes we're trying to hide behind something and it's harder even in the virtual world right now. It's really hard to connect. We are so missing and just yearning for those connections that we can't get. So in the virtual world, it's about taking down the curtain and really revealing that vulnerable, real, honest, authentic self as much as possible. We're all human beings in this situation. We're all striving for personal connection that we so desperately need at this time. So I think in making an impact too with your associates or your audience, whoever that is, the more real you can be, the more engaging the presentation, and the more an audience will take away from it. They'll believe in it, and then they might feel it, and then they might own it and walk away with something.
No, it's a great point. So I think you've already shared a lot about your common tips, right? And best practices, and even those more specifically around virtual presentations, around being real, being your authentic self, finding ways to engage the audience. Are there any other tips you have around virtual presentations that you wanted to share?
Well, I mean, have great equipment, make sure you're plugged into a hard line. There's a lot of things like that that are technical tips that will help you in your presentation. And again, the basics, and maybe this is obvious, but speak to the camera.
Make sure Amazon isn't ringing the doorbell.
Exactly. And sometimes though, that's the thing that we've all adapted over the last year now to be more accepting of those things too. So again, it all goes back to being honest. Be real in the moment. If the doorbell rings, you know what? The doorbell rings. It happens. We're all in the same situation. So it's almost something that brings us together, even in that one little way of this one vulnerable moment. We've seen it on everything. Newscasters, the Grammys, everything that's happened that's been in a virtual world has had one moment of real life that has jumped in that is not the pretty perfect picture of some broadcast. So just own it. And, it's similar. I've said this quite a few times, but I think in every instance, go back to be real and just try and connect.
No, I think we can all take that away, right? I was going to ask you about your top tip and just best practice that you have. And it sounds like it really is just be real. Focus more on connecting with the audience and being yourself than anything that you think you're supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when you're fighting it and trying to do something that's not authentic, the audience feels it, especially in this already disconnected place. It's so hard. You can hide it a little bit more, honestly, in the live environment because there's other stuff around you. When you're the only thing on that computer screen and you're trying to stay engaged, it's really hard to hide this curtain that you're hiding behind. So just let it down. Just be there, be real, be authentic, and have a conversation.
It's interesting you mentioned, focus more on what the audience needs to hear, right? And what they could really benefit or take away from instead of share everything, right? You think you need to share. And that really struck me. how do you coach and train some of your clients on really getting to the key points, because you feel like there's so much you can say, right, about any topic. If you're about to launch a product or, you have some key things, how do you coach them on really narrowing down the key points?
That's always fun because there are certain things, depending, especially in life sciences, where you have to say certain things. Certain things have to be shown on a slide just for legality or compliance issues, right? But I think the biggest thing is to say and continually go through the presentations with them and ask basically the big question is, so what? What does that mean to the sales reps in the audience? It depends on, or are you presenting to shareholders, or who are you presenting to? So the idea is with every segment of a presentation, if it's long and wordy, do they really need to see all that? Will some of this be being shared with them as a document? What is the point of each one, and how is it going to change the audience in a way that they will be successful in whatever their task is? That's the fundamental question. So sure, certain things you need to share for compliance sake. Okay, great. But how can you share it in a way that matters to the person receiving the information?
I think that's a constant struggle in this life sciences industry, right? And I think you've even shared with me before, what can you share in advance to really limit the amount that's shown on the screen, especially in a virtual presentation, which I thought was some really great advice.
And to that note, too, for your virtual screen time, as far as content and visuals, really less is more on a virtual presentation. Much of what is on the slide can often be said, which you would do in a live event. You may have it there, or a handout, you're there, but for some reason, many clients feel they need to put everything on a screen. And then if everything is on the screen in front of the audience, our tendency as human beings is to read. So we stop listening. So take anything you can off the screen and have it in as your talking points, if you will, and have an image that evokes something that is engaging. Have a few statistics are different, and I know it's hard, especially in life sciences. There are certain places when we get into some of our medical presentations, there's a lot of data and a lot of statistics, but even those, it can be a larger image that has a circle, highlighted something, and it's not there for long.
No, that's a great point, because then it allows really the audience to focus on you and what you're saying instead of reading slides. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Less is more. That's key. I want to thank our listeners for joining us. By the way, please be sure to visit us at encompasscnl.com/podcast to listen to recent episodes and subscribe using your favorite podcast platform. You can also access the Encompass blog on our site.
Encompass Communications and Learning helps life sciences colleagues advance their skills and knowledge. Our team includes experts who've worked in pharmaceutical and medical device sales and marketing, health insurance, medicine, and instructional design. We partner with those in life sciences to create customized communications and learning experiences that support medical advances for patients.